Welcome to the party. I'm Sam Ekstrom of Locked On Sports Minnesota. I'm told there's breaking news out of the gate, and I don't know what it is yet.
I'm Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings, and I refused to tell Sam the breaking news to make him overrate it.
I'm Arif Hassan with Pro Football Network. As soon as Luke said there was breaking news, I checked Twitter, and technically it is breaking news.
Luke Inman at Luke_Spinman. Just tell us. I'm dying in here. Who is it? What's going on?
You'll find out after this on the Minnesota Football Party.
Locked On Sports Minnesota Podcast. It's endless Minnesota Vikings talk with the diverse voices of your local experts. It's time for the Minnesota Football Party. It's your guys hanging out talking next level Vikings football. So join in with Pro Football Network's Arif Hassan, Locked On Vikings Luke Braun, Superior Sports Talk's Luke Inman, and Vikings insider Sam Ekstrom, plus the biggest names in Minnesota football for the Minnesota Football Party. And it starts now.
It's training camp report day eve, and we are excited about it. You're on Locked On Sports Minnesota, the Minnesota Football Party back on a Monday. The full four-man crew is here. I'm Sam Ekstrom, Luke and Luke, Arif Hassan, talking Vikings football for the next 45 minutes to an hour or so. Plenty to get to. Mr. Mankato predictions, the Jordan Addison speeding fallout, training camp sleepers. We're going to touch on all of that, but first... Luke Braun.
I love something as much as Sam loves that noise.
Get that in your life.
Should we play it again?
Inject that in my face.
100%.
You can
we
play
have?
as much as you want. The Vikings have signed a free agent, the one we've all been waiting for. Tight end and long snapper Colin Thompson, who's been in Carolina for a few seasons. Before that, was in the initial run, the 2020 run of the XFL, as well as the AAF, and was actually in the league for a couple years before that. So he's been around a little bit, 29-year-old tight end, long snapper hybrid. And he responded to the Adam Schefter tweet himself with the Snoop Dogg gif going, who?
This was
Okay.
worth a Schefter bomb?
Now I'm on board.
Yeah. The vibe is
can't
good.
believe
The
this
vibe
was
is good.
That's a great vibe. Him and Nick Muse are going to have a ton of fun.
Oh, yeah. That's the threes in the tight end room.
Carrying on the tradition of Josiah Price, by the way, tight end / long snapper.
Yeah. David
He
Morgan.
has no stats in the NFL, but he's
Perfect.
been in the league for like
Well,
6 years.
He's got a
Also,
touchdown, didn't
He
he?
was out of the league because he was doing spring leagues for a couple years.
I do want to appreciate the fact that Luke Braun called the 2020 XFL the initial run of the XFL.
I corrected myself. I said initial run or the 2020 run because I forgot for a second.
Now the Vikings still do have a roster spot available, right, Braun? You've been all over this.
Thank you.
Junior Aho is exempt because he's an international signee.
I have a question about this. So when I was looking it up, I thought the exemption only applied after cutdown day, towards the practice squad. Does it
No.
like? So it applies, so then if that's the case, why did the Vikings cut someone before signing this free agent? Why have the Vikings been persistently at 90 if they can have 91? Because when I looked at it, it wasn't very deep, but when I looked it up, it seemed like the only exemption people were talking about was a practice squad exemption, which of course doesn't exist until after cutdown day.
It's the answer is Dennis Ryan retired, and they just don't know how to get a 91st jersey. I think they don't have the means to
They
get
lost
that
the
91st
phone number.
jersey. Yeah, Dennis Ryan took all the trade secrets with him.
You might be right. I am going off of a Ben Gessling clarifying tweet about this, so I assume that he just asked someone. I don't know why they never had a true full roster, but I guess nothing's making you have a full 90 if you don't have a 91st guy you actually want, I guess.
John Reed was really not in their good graces.
Rip.
Hey, we
Man,
can
that's
you.
rough.
We can
Rough,
keep you, but
yeah.
we're not. We are going to talk too about bottom of the roster later in this show, because I would say in the past that been a couple guys. I would say Chad Beebe, Dan Chisena, whatever you called him, I would say they were at one point like the 88th guy on the roster, and they made the team. So we're going to focus on the sleepers later in the show. But let's clean up the Jordan Addison stuff and then get into our Mr. Mankato predictions. Jordan Addison, we softly reported this on Thursday, and credit to Bill Enright, who people were skeptical about him. People were doubting
insane
his report. How dare you make up news that hasn't been corroborated? He was hours ahead of anybody else on this. All the major news outlets. He had it right. And down to the vehicle. Lamborghini.
That's right. Yeah, he had the vehicle correct too.
Yeah, 140 miles an hour. And I drove that stretch Friday night too, with just, that in mind.
Yeah,
scary.
As a reporter. Did you do it at 3:17 a.m. though?
It was a little earlier, but I still have a hard time imagining that stretch is free of traffic or cars at that hour. I mean, there's a lot of people leaving a downtown area still after bar close, right? Like it's a very dangerous situation.
I think intuitively correct, but like watching the video, there was virtually no one on that road.
The traffic stop video, yeah, he'd obviously slowed down at that point.
Yeah, he's clearly not going 140 in that video. Yeah.
I don't know how you catch a guy who's going 140, even if you're like an officer who probably has trained to drive that fast. I still don't know how you catch up and citation them, but it's kind of a lose-lose.
Credit to Addison. As soon as he saw the lights, he slowed down.
Yeah, he did.
That's true.
Trying to drive
incident-free. Yeah, incident-free.
He did go to the left and not all the way over to the right, but
which also spawned its own set of social media arguments. People were raring to go.
Really? Of course it did.
Well, I mean, personally, I also thought it was weird that he stopped on the left instead of the right. I would have stopped on the right, as is like the practice they teach you, but like to make apparently a thing of it.
Yeah, apparently that's like if you're on a multi-lane road and you're closer to the left, or if it's like easier to get to the left, they're like, just go to the left. Apparently, like that's the way to do it.
That makes sense. I'm just saying that's what my driver's school taught me. It would not shock me if they taught me the wrong thing for the sake of simplicity. But the fact that it's for 16-year-olds, right? The fact that like that spawned its own argument, the amount of mad you're allowed to be spawned an argument. It felt like such a weird incident to draw so much fan base ire, right? And any pushback on it, people just assumed you're defending someone who went 140 in a 55, right? Like this is crazy.
The number matters, right? Like I think there is speeding, then there's joyriding, and then there's something that's totally like this is probably a little beyond that in most people's perception.
Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
This is nuts.
Just like no one's on the road, I'm gunning it.
Like someone put out the stopping distance calculator if you made a decision to brake in 1 second. And it still is longer than a football field. So there's danger there. And credit to him for not having anyone in the car and not being intoxicated. But that also means you made a sober-minded decision just by yourself, just to do that. Like that also doesn't
round of discourse you're springing up.
Look good to you.
People will vehemently disagree with you, like angrily. It's amazing.
52
it's a
miles
lose-lose for Addison
than...
and a lose-lose for us talking about it.
Yeah. I've never seen a story this minor generate this much fervor.
Yeah, no, that's it. And and the thing is, like, people have made comparisons, right? People talk about like a comparison to Henry Ruggs, which I think is wildly inappropriate for a number of reasons. Mm-hmm. People have made a comparison to Jalen Carter, which is more appropriate, but not really the same. But that one, I think, makes a lot more sense. But like, we've seen players engage in ludicrous speeding before on Adrian Peterson, like on the Vikings, right? Yeah. And not generate this kind of pushback. So I was very surprised, and me expressing that surprise was also evidently me saying it's not that big a deal. It is like a thing that people should be upset about. The Vikings should be upset about it. I saw some people mention that, whatever state issued his driver's license should suspend it, which Fair. That makes sense to me. That's like reckless. That
is the protocol.
Yeah.
In Minnesota for that.
And that all makes sense, right? And the length to which he should have his license suspended, I don't know, but that all makes sense to me. Being upset with that makes sense to me. Treating it like it's like a catastrophic indictment of the team is like wild to me, especially because they drafted Ed Ingram last year. First of all, crazy that would be speeding again, much more than normal speeding. I don't want to downplay how it can be dangerous.
You have to hedge it so hard because people will get so crazy when you're
very upsetting, but yes.
It's like, we know it was a lot. Everyone knows that.
But there is a substantial difference between engaging in behavior that is risky, right? That has the potential to do harm, and engaging in behavior that does harm, right? That's just two different categories of morality, right? And then there's also the escalating factor of, driving drunk, which I think people seem to think that the problem with driving drunk is the way people have talked about it. Obviously, this is not what people actually think, but the way people talk about it is the problem with driving drunk is that it makes you unable to decide whether or not you should go fast. And it's no, the issue with driving drunk is that every millisecond involved in the driving process is more dangerous because you do not have the ability to make quick judgments or make good judgments, right? So not only are your judgments delayed, but they're also poor judgments, right? And so it magnifies the risk in substantial ways beyond just speeding. And also, I don't think the 1 second, the distance calculator, that's a really important tool because that really helps people understand how dangerous it was. I don't know if 1 second is the appropriate kind of reaction time thing that we should kind of gauge. That I don't think it's necessarily accurate. But to use that example, the difference is probably between half a second and 1.5 seconds, given, depending on your level of sobriety and stuff like that, for that kind of braking speed and braking distance and whatever, right? And so, he demonstrated poor judgment while sober, which is eyebrow raising, maybe, but the problem with driving drunk is not that once you get in a car, you make a decision to go fast. It's that every single opportunity you have to make a decision, which I remind you is for every fraction of a second that you're driving, is made worse and massively magnified. And that was one of the issues with Henry Ruggs, right? It's not only that he drove fast, and he did drive faster than Addison did on a street that is less capable or less built for it, that has more stops, right?
Correct.
But he also did it while he was drunk. There was just a number of things and he had a passenger. There were a number of things that magnified what Henry Ruggs did, which is why it's not just because someone died, although that clearly, escalates things in the eyes of the law, but he would have gone through a trial process and potentially face prison time for the series of decisions that he made, whether or not somebody died. And he has never demonstrated, I shouldn't say never, he has not demonstrated the kind of remorse that you would hope someone in his situation would, probably for legal reasons. I understand that there's he has to protect himself sort of thing. But for example, his lawyers have consistently pushed back the court date. They've argued that, you should not be able to introduce his blood alcohol content into evidence. It's just a substantially different situation than what Jordan Addison did. And so I think having the appropriate reaction to major speeding, I guess is a difficult thing because it's we can't treat it like it's just speeding, but we also can't treat it like he went out to harm people or made decisions that were so catastrophically bad that harming someone was a very likely outcome.
Yeah, there's levels.
I don't think it's responsible to take a reckless driving charge, which I think is a better thing to call it than a speeding ticket.
Yeah.
A reckless driving
and that's what he's charged with.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's responsible to take that and then inflate it to this reflects poorly on the Vikings judgment. It's not
that. Yeah. That doesn't even make sense.
Why did this one get so magnified? Is it because we're just at that point in the off season where there's nothing to talk about? So this
I think that's it.
I think part of it is that he said, let's get paid in the draft. And people think
it's okay, everybody's gearing back up for football again. And, a little bit more keen and aware their antennas are out. Oh, here's a great juicy story. Let's go off on this. Or do you think there was a part of it where some people were already a little frustrated, or he was kind of rubbing some fans, let's just say, the wrong way already.
I think that plays a role. I will say, if you ask people, they won't tell you because if you ask people, they're just like, a lot of people, have experienced, deaths because, have experienced deaths among their acquaintances or their family because of speeding. And that sucks. I'm sorry. But is it more likely the case now than it was 3 years ago? That I find really difficult to like process or believe, especially because, we just did not treat players who engaged in this level of, because this is not the first time a player's gone 140 and a 55 and gotten caught and they got put on a speeding ticket. Like, this just happens, right? It sucks. It shouldn't happen. I'm not saying that we should absolve players because it happens. What I'm saying is it is an unusual level. And I think, Luke, to your question, I think a lot of it is that it's right before training camp. So it's literally the longest possible distance that we've had since real NFL news has happened since the draft. You could not have this happen any later. I think that some people, I guess, were rubbed the wrong way by Jordan Addison, which to me was very, very surprising. But then I saw a bunch of people talk about it. And it just feels like people getting mad at the "let's get paid" statement just makes it feel like you've never seen a player interview ever in your life before. "Let's get paid" is very clearly just let's do as much damage as possible to the rest of the league.
That's a revisionist take. To be upset at that is revisionist.
Yeah.
Hopefully
people were very mad on the night. It was wild how serious. Oh my God, it was insane.
Yeah, but it's but it's very clearly we should both get 2,000 receiving yards. That's obviously what it was.
Right.
And the idea that it got translated into money is that's just how players talk. I don't know what to tell you. That's not a selfish. He can't negotiate his contract for 4 years, right? I don't know what to tell you about. It's not that he's just a money grubbing whatever.
There's got to be an offbeat radio show that's just harping on this every day or something, because it's way too prevalent for this to be organic.
Yeah,
someone got mad
wild.
that he wore was it pink or whatever?
Yep, pink in the shade.
He wore something flashy. That's.
And from
people
there,
have this expectation of athletes. I see this with Wolves stuff all the time too. People have this expectation that athletes are supposed to be consummate professional drones. They're showing up to a 9 to 5 every day and they're not supposed to say a single word. Put your head down and shut up and dribble. And it's these people are just as much humans as you are. They just have a way bigger spotlight on them, and you are exposed to this much of their life, this tiny fraction of who they are, what their thoughts are, and what they have to say.
They
you don't know them nearly as well as you think
leave,
you do.
They're playing an emotional game.
Yeah.
Well, after
they go and plug themselves in and go into a deep sleep overnight. They don't actually have lives.
You just zip up. But after you leave your 9 to 5, or it's a Friday night and you go out to drink, no one is hey man, have you thought about Initech? Have you thought about how this reflects on Initech? Have you thought does that suit have pinstripes on it? That is flashy.
You're not going to wear that, are you?
Have you thought about how this reflects on Initech? I cannot believe you. And then
people
you file
you're representing tonight.
A report with Initech with, of course, a cover sheet.
Right. It just seemed like people were looking for something to pick on after that. And it wasn't everybody. It wasn't the entire fan base or media. It was just a certain group of people. But it was just now he's not healthy for rookie mini camp. And now he's going to be behind the 8 ball all season. And he didn't do himself any favors now with this. But this is just kind of the cherry on top. I think you're right, Arif. I think the timing of this, just a week before training camp, had that long, slow off season here, the summer abyss, right? It just happened to be one of those things where people are starting to gear back up for football, and then this happened. So
I will say this before we close out. Sorry, Sam. I just have so many thoughts on this kind of thing. Is that this is the kind of thing that is not consistent over time. People will lose that belief if the player plays well. Why do I know this? Because people care way more and have been much more passionate about Deion Sanders than they've ever been about Champ Bailey, than they've ever been about Darrelle Revis, right? They care way more about Deion Sanders. They care more about Randy Moss than they do Jerry Rice, and that's not just a recency thing, right? They care more about Randy Moss than they do about Terrell Owens, and that's just not just because I'm in Minnesota. They do. And Terrell Owens was not flashy, right? Chad Ochocinco, Chad Johnson was like a very good receiver. He was never an all-pro receiver. But the way people talked about him, interacted with him, was like he was an all-pro receiver, right? Like, Chad Johnson is never getting into the Hall of Fame. That's not a knock on him. But the way that people talked about him and enjoyed his stuff and became fans of him was as if he was destined for the Hall of Fame. People followed Antonio Brown much more than they followed Julio Jones, right? Or Larry Fitzgerald. Yeah, we all respect Larry Fitzgerald. Everyone respects Larry Fitzgerald. But how many people are super fans of Larry Fitzgerald? So this stuff washes away over time and people just flip onto the other side of it as soon as a player has a distinct enough personality that you can kind of parasocially kind of just glom onto or attach yourself to.
And that applies whether or not the thing that the player does is morally objectionable. Yeah. Like, you can do something real bad, score 2 touchdowns on my fantasy team, and I'm going to stop talking about it.
100, and that's the hypocrisy of it. And I would even say the other way. Like, I would say that, Ed Ingram has been accused of some more morally objectionable stuff, and he went through a really awkward opening press conference. And really, I think after that, I think people were just kind of moved on to football. Like, whether that's right or wrong, I think people are. And Dalvin Cook, he had red flags coming in, from college and stuff in his past. I think people moved on from that too. And then there was another incident in 2021. People moved on from that mentally, right? And in the discourse, like, this stuff does fade, and unfortunately is very related to performance too. And Jordan Addison has no performance to fall back on. And he has really no personality to fall back on either. And like, I get it. The first impressions haven't been good, but they're all independent. Like, okay, bad press conference. He's shy, nervous, doesn't know how to, play to the cameras yet. He's injured. Okay. He might actually be injured, people. Like, that might not be a personal flaw. And then obviously,
injuries are always a personal flaw. You're just not tough enough.
Well,
I could make it.
Didn't want to go there, but you're right. You're right. 100% right.
Not only will the vendetta go away though when the guy goes off for 2 touchdowns and $180 and 12 catches, but the script is flipped and it's like, that dude's got that dog in him. He played
right?
That's what I've been saying.
He's gonna.
You got to be a little bit insane.
Right.
We're gonna talk about training camp sleepers, Mr. Mankato predictions coming up after I tell you about FanDuel Sportsbook. Training camp report day eve is today, but hey, baseball still in full swing. You can bet the Twins tonight. They're minus 108 against the Seattle Mariners coming off a sweep of the White Sox. You can bet that game, money lines, run lines, and all baseball games at FanDuel Sportsbook right now. New customers get 10 times their first bet amount in bonus bets back. That's right, 10 times their first bet amount in bonus bets back. So bet 20, get 200, whether you win or lose. That's free money in your pocket. Put that on MLB. Put it on the 3M Open coming up this weekend in the Twin Cities. Or maybe there's some juicy NFL future bets that you can make. Do that at FanDuel, FanDuel.com/lockedon, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Claim those $200 in bonus bets today. FanDuel is an official partner of Major League Baseball. All right, we were having some fun before the show, going back in time, remembering Mr. Mankatos of the past. And we give the hat tip to Score North for being the originators of this contest, which has now taken on a whole new life of its own. But past winners, some great names in here. Brandon Dillon, 2019. Kyle Sloter, 2018. Tayshawn Bauer, 2017. Jaron Kearse, 2016. And then, how about this 1-2 punch? Diggs in 15 and Thielen in 14. And for those that are uninitiated, this is sort of the breakout, unsuspecting player of camp. So high draft picks don't count. Established players don't count. And today we're going to nominate our favorites for this award. But man, some flubs in there, some guys that became nothing, and some hits, some real stud muffins in that mix as well.
There's definitely some years where the offense was just really bad in camp, and you just kind of had to pick someone. We're like, I don't know, Brandon Dillon.
Yeah. Marion Flash, he had a nickname.
Yeah, he had a nickname, and that was kind of the only exciting thing that happened on offense that whole camp.
Yeah, if you had asked me who won in 2019 or who won in 2020 was when Cam Dantzler was drafted, I don't think I would have gotten that correct. Cam Dancer, by the way, won it in 2020, which is the first of my objections to Mr. Mankato. It should not include third round picks. But yeah, it's just like sometimes you're just like, yeah, I don't know. But like 2015, yeah, it had to be Diggs, right? 2014, it had to be Thielen. I think it was pretty obvious because that was like the first. I should say it's the first time I like very seriously started covering the Vikings, but it's the first time I had like a fairly large enough audience that people could track what I was doing. And also I happened to be very deeply covering the Vikings. And so that experience I'm always going to remember because I had arguments about Adam Thielen with a bunch of people, right? So that's going to be very easy for me to remember. But like Cameron Dancer, I don't think I would remember that. Now, who would I have picked in 2020? I don't remember who's on that roster, so I don't know what to tell you the answer. But that one just seems pretty odd. And then Brandon Dillon, that's just I did really like how he looked.
If you were to tell me,
I did.
In 2021, so 2 years ago to the day, right? Like the week going into training camp, that Brandon Dillon was going to win Mr. Mankato over Zach Davidson, I would have lost my mind. Zach Davidson probably had the most hype going in. I'm sure that was probably my pick, actually, to win Mr. Mankato was Zach Davidson. He was everybody's sexy pick that year in 2021.
I know it wasn't mine because I was being arbitrarily contrarian.
That's right. Yeah, I remember. You remember.
That tracks.
Brandon Dillon was a member of the field. He didn't even have his own odds that year.
Wow. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. So we don't have the odds yet.
The field.
Chris Long, KSTP. Usually he's got the odds on this, but we're going to come out and put our predictions on record before training camp report day. Inman, I gotta keep you to one. You only get one.
Okay.
So you're gonna have to lock it in. Okay. If you want to talk about some of your your candidates, that's fine, but gotta limit you to one. So Luke,
that's fair.
Take us off. Spinman, who you got?
And I had three guys written down, but I'll just jump right to it here. You came on the show, I think it was, right after OTAs, and you said this guy was catching everything in sight. The momentum from last year's Green Bay game to now steadily gotten better and better, talking about Jalen Nailor. And I think when it comes to just being a better, more polished wide receiver with the route running and the hands and all that, I think he's already got the edge on Jalen Reagor for that wide receiver 4 spot right now. And I think he's just going to go out there, keep making some splash plays in practice, get a lot of votes, not to mention he's probably going to get some reps at punt returner as well, just to sweeten the deal. So I had 2 other names written down. I'll throw him in my honorable mentions. I'll save him for after you guys go. But he's my pick if I had to put money on it, even if he is one of the favorites when it's all said and done, which when Chris Long comes out with his odds, I'm sure Jalen Nailor is going to be in that top 3 when it comes to being a favorite.
I think you're right. Arif Hassan.
All right. I feel like this one is just going to be fairly consistent with the way that I've talked about this player throughout the course of the offseason, Dwayne McBride. I don't know that there's going to be an enormous role available for him or anything like that during the regular season, but he is the kind of player that I expect would look pretty good in a preseason environment. And that's part of the competition. It's not just making the roster, although I believe that is a requirement, which, by the way, Brandon Dillon, I think, made the roster for 1 day, so that was bittersweet. But you have to make the roster, and I believe that he will, but it's not just that. You have to generate hype and buzz in camp. And I think that it's difficult for a running back to do that because like everyone scores 60-yard touchdowns in camp. But in the preseason, you've got a real opportunity to make a splash. And I think given the fact that the starters never play under O'Connell in the preseason, I don't know about never, but you know what I mean, right? That we've got a lot of carries available for somebody like McBride. So I'm going to pick him. I'm confident that like my honorable mentions will be very similar to Spinman's.
Braun.
I feel like those are going to be the 2 favorites.
Chalk.
Yeah. I think those would probably be the 2 guys I would have picked, but in the interest of going a different way.
Okay, Najee Thompson, we'll give him 2.
I agree with Arif that I don't think 3rd-round picks should be eligible, but they are, though.
But once they are, okay, yeah, okay.
So right. I'll just take Mekhi Blackman, who's starting with the ones. And I feel like if nobody else, if nobody has a huge breakout and becomes the story of camp, which happens sometimes, like sometimes everybody just kind of does what they're expected to do, then it feels like you're going to go with, oh yeah, the guy that got a starting job, I guess. So I'll take Mekhi Blackman.
How does this guy fall in my lap? So The running backs are going to cannibalize each other. The wide receivers, there's a ton of them. They're going to cannibalize each other. Who's going to be throwing him the ball?
That works. Like a wide receiver's won it half the time.
Who's going to be throwing? This is the only time we've ever been able to like get excited about this for a Mr. Mankato. Jaron Hall is going to win. Jaron Hall, who's going to create buzz? The quarterback.
Why would a quarterback have won it? They've all been like second round picks or bad. There's like Luke, why would a quarterback win it? Sam's right.
This ever get it?
No, Slaughter did win it.
He did win it. Okay.
Slaughter. Yeah. But
other than
it's
James
Hall.
Vandenberg, right? Like which quarterback was going to win it?
Right.
Now we may have taken the 4 likeliest favorites. So honorable mentions. Let's get some sleepers in there. Inman, who you got?
That defensive line rotation, wide open, outside of Tonga, the nose tackle position, specifically, super thin. I think Jaquelin Roy could be the next guy in line in that rotation. He's over 300 pounds. Plus the fact you guys mentioned he already got reps with the ones too. So that's a great sign. And just knowing he's going up against, okay, so let's see, even if he's with the ones, all right, going up against pretty weak, soft interior offensive line just in general. I just like someone from this defensive line rotation in general to make some noise, throw a dart up there, pick somebody's name from a hat. But I think Jaquelin Roy has a good shot to be one of those guys.
I just feel like the 2 undrafted that got all the money are pretty obvious honorable mentions here. Andre Carter and Ivan Pace. I just feel like if either of them make the roster and then make 1 or 2 plays in the preseason, that I'm not going to say locks them in, but it gives them such a great, and there's a lot of room available for them to be able to make the roster too. I don't think anyone is, overly impressed with the edge talent here that we've got for depth. I don't think anyone is super impressed with the linebacker depth. So like if Troy Dye gets cut for Ivan Pace, I don't think anyone would be like, wow, I never saw that coming. In fact, I'm writing a 53-man right now. Both of them make it, right? And so I think it's very possible that either of them make the roster, and then if one of them makes the roster, I think that gives them a really good chance, unless Mekhi Blackman just like goes off in the preseason, or Dwayne McBride has 2 60-yard runs, which is not really his game, but just work with me. Then I just feel like an undrafted free agent rookie making the roster. Once those are all givens, they're like a 70% chance to win the award.
I want to go way off the wall here. And bring up Lucky Jackson, who was completely out of football before the XFL. He came out of Western Kentucky in 2020 during the pandemic, and like nobody went to that pro day because it was literally like 4 days after everything shut down. And he always felt like he kind of got overlooked because of that. And he never got any opportunity, not so much as a rookie minicamp invite. Like he always felt like, man, I just need to get some eyeballs on me and I can do it. And he went to the CFL and like spring league and all these random things. Not until he got to the XFL where he broke out and became one of the best players in one of the best receivers in the XFL. And now he's got this opportunity. If you're looking for a breakout star we totally didn't see coming, that might be a place to look.
I would look in that same vein of backup receiver to Thayer Thomas. And again, skeptical because I think there's so many that they're like Malik Knowles, Garrett Mogg, Thayer Thomas, Tristan Jackson, Lucky Jackson. I'm probably forgetting a couple. There's so many options that I worry will be hard for one to stand out. But I think Thayer Thomas just has a high floor as a pass catcher. And I have a slight advantage because I got to watch him in OTA's minicamp as well. I liked what I saw, but he was productive for 5 years at NC State. It wasn't like he, did nothing. He's probably 23, 24 years old, might have a better handle on learning a playbook. So I just think that he's going to kind of be an easy guy to have chemistry with in the second half of a preseason game. Nice little fallback option on 3rd down and 5. So I'm going to go Thayer, also a friend of the Ron Johnson show. Big fan. We're going to talk bottom of the roster after I remind folks that we're partnered with SiriusXM, the SXM app. You can find all the Locked On Sports Minnesota programming there, as well as the hometown broadcast, like the Twins games. Listen to Corey Provis tonight at 6:40 p.m. as the Twins take on the Mariners. And hey, subscribe to Locked On Sports Minnesota as well. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. SiriusXM app, Amazon Fire, Roku, all of the above. Find our shows, the Ron Johnson Show, Minnesota Sports Rankum, and of course, the Minnesota Football Party. All right. We've talked some sleepers, Mr. Mankato candidates, but I'm looking to the very bottom, spots 86 through 90, like the bottom 5 on the roster. Who do we think those people are? And can any of them emerge? Could any of them be the next Dan Chisena, the next Chad Beebe to actually make the Minnesota Vikings roster? Let me present my 5, and then you guys can tell me if I'm wrong or present your 5 as well. So here would be my 5 at the moment. Benton Whitley, Najee Thompson, Luke Braun's man crush, Jackie Chen, Junior Aho, and Cephas Johnson.
These are all guys you have making the 53?
No. These are my bottom,
Okay.
bottom 5.
Locked in.
These are breakout
All
players.
Bottom 5 on the roster. If I were to circle one, though, that could make this team. Jackie Chen. I think we're looking for some interior depth, some offensive line help. I would go with Jackie Chen as a kind of. We don't know anything about him, right? There's bias against him because we don't know. He comes from D3, Braun?
Pace.
D2. What level of college is that?
I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Small school for sure.
So yeah, the lack of information bias, but yeah, I would circle him. But that's my bottom of the roster. Braun, who do you have? Bottom of your roster.
Jackie Chen definitely feels like one there. He's somebody that like scouts have been like, I don't know if this dude can play, but he's got a crazy body type. So I guess let's see what he's got. Like that kind of feels like the beginning and end of the evaluation. I was going to say, I think Lucky Jackson, when you get in XFL guys, they tend to be the guys that, get cut at the, when you're signing someone or at the, like that first round where you're cutting 5 people. I was going to go with somebody like maybe Jalen Williams or Theo Jackson, or someone like Garrett Mogg. Was that 5? Did I name 5?
5-ish. Yep.
Yeah. I feel like somebody like CJ Colden or Jalen Williams, maybe, I mean, those guys are just fast. So maybe that's enough and they can put something else together.
There are a lot of anonymous corners on this team too. Like in addition to the guys that are already, we don't even know if they're good and they're probably going to start. There's also a lot of guys who we don't know at all, like Jalen Williams, Talon Barnes, Tay Gowan, CJ Colden. Yeah,
there's a lot of filler guys for a group that had like 3 people in March in the whole room. So you kind of had to fill it out with like whoever you could find.
And they cut
Najee Thompson, Reed. I think is a pick for this because he's not here because he played good corner. He played corner for 2 years. He was a wide receiver convert, and he's not here because he's particularly athletic. So it's like he has to be here for special teams, which is a disadvantage he has on everybody else that at least did play good corner at some point in college.
Braun, you mentioned, hey, this guy's got a crazy body type. Let's just see if the dude can play. Calvin Avery, the nose tackle from Illinois, UDFA, obviously. Nothing to lose here. Great position, though, as far as like just a clear path for playing time, getting just a volume of reps going too. I kind of mentioned with Jaquelin Roy, but like Avery's in the same boat as far as just not a lot of competition behind Tonga. Got the size, 6'1", 347. At 6'1", just an absolute brick. So just a classic old school nose tackle. Soak up those blocks, open up some stuff for the players around you. Somebody's got to win that backup nose tackle job. And who knows, maybe they want another guy in that mix as well by the time it's all said and done. Avery could surprise some folks, get some run with the 2s before camp is over.
Arif, you're muted, by the way. How's your knowledge of the 86th guys on the Vikings roster now that you're a national writer?
Very poor. I'm going to pick the guys that did not show up on the consensus board among the undrafted rookies. So this will give us some idea, right? So for example, Alan Ali ranked significantly higher than Jackie Chen, but both of them significant kind of doesn't matter once you're past 300. But, Alan Ali was like 380 something. Jackie Chen was like 680 something, right? So like that's something to kind of keep in mind. But Garrett Mogg did not show up on the consensus board at all, right? So Junior Aho, I don't think he counts. So that's going to be my 6th. Like he doesn't count. But we should mention
getting a roster exemption in your top 5.
Yeah, well, I mean, appropriate, right? Yeah. But here are the guys that either because of a data entry error from me or because not enough people ranked them, did not appear among the undrafted rookies on the consensus big board. Najee Thompson, which Luke Braun explained why that was the case. Garrett Mogg, CJ Colden. This one surprised me. Cephas Johnson didn't show up. And Wilson Huber, which means that people like Abraham Beauplan, I actually don't know how to pronounce that, but that
seems right.
Intuitively that feels like the correct pronunciation. Abraham Beauplan showed up. He's like 580s, right? Both Alan Ali, Jackie Chen showed up. Malik Knowles, obviously he showed up. People were kind of familiar with him. Ben Sims showed up. Jalen Williams, I don't think showed up, but I think that was a data entry error from me, so I'm not going to count that. But yeah. And also Zach Ogile.
Ogile.
I'm going to replace Najee. No, I'm going to replace Cephas with Ogile. So that's my 5. So my 5 are Garrett Mogg, CJ Colden, Ogile, Wilson Huber, and Najee Thompson, with Junior Aho as my roster exemption.
I like Cephas Johnson's an interesting one too, because he was he only started playing wide receiver like a year and I guess a half ago, because there was kind of one where he was doing both and being a Taysom Hill type at Southeastern Louisiana, which he had to transfer to because he got benched as a quarterback at South Alabama. Like, that is an interesting path to get to this point, but
to get to the NFL, that is.
But it's just on the basis of like, man, this guy's really athletic. If we can teach him to play receiver, like it's a very Moritz Boringer kind of thing. Like, he doesn't know anything, but maybe if we teach him everything, he can be somebody.
I'm fascinated too, just by the outlier approach, that if Kwesi wants to find 5 guys that are body type outliers, position change outliers, crazy pace college outliers, like I actually like that approach a lot to UDFA, because those are darts you're throwing anyway. So why not try to, get that 1% edge and find the guys on the fringes of football? I'm a fan.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And it kind of matches kind of what the way that Kwesi has approached a lot of things, not just with like undrafted free agency, but like you take a look at the kinds of free agency signed. It's all, I shouldn't say it's all, but like a lot of those guys are people that, might be undervalued because they're coming off of a bad year, right? It's not the same as like finding a size outlier or something like that, but it is the same as like, trying to figure out kind of where the most value available is historically. And it worked out, right? Za'Darius Smith coming off of a bad year. The Vikings get something great out of him. Obviously you had to trade him, but like that seemed like Marcus Davenport, like that seems to be kind of the approach that Kwesi is taking, is that being like really aggressive about, when you have room to find some margins, attempting to find undervalued players, right? Which is not the same as like, that's not what he's doing in the first, second, or third round. Like aggressively, it feels like he's not doing that. But it is like when you don't have a lot of capital to spend, go for the boom bust type guys.
Let's comment below, by the way. Training camp sleepers, Mr. Mankato predictions, whatever you want. When you comment, it helps the video, helps other people find the show. Let's end with this, a little 4-minute drill on the Danielle Hunter outcome. Is he going to report, and what's going to happen with Danielle Hunter? A minute each for everybody. The 4-minute drill to end the show.
Start the clock. It's time to execute the 4-minute drill.
1 minute on the clock. We go around the horn. Luke Inman, Danielle Hunter, what's going to happen?
Man, I know they're in rebuild mode to a degree, all about resetting this cap, maybe moving on from Kirk Cousins, figuring out the quarterback of the future next year. But at a certain point, you still have to have talent if you plan on being competitive again this year, which they fully do. I can't imagine being okay as a GM and a coach, knowing I just willingly lost Za'Darius Smith and Danielle Hunter in one offseason. I just couldn't fathom that. So I'd be pretty stunned if he wasn't back, and pretty disappointed, to be totally honest. I think a deal gets done. I think it happens a few days into camp, like we saw under that Spielman regime with guys like Harrison Smith, Linval Joseph, Kyle Rudolph. There's a couple other big name veterans that came into camp looking for a new deal as well. That's my hope anyways. gun to my head, I'm going to say day 3, Danielle Hunter locks up a new deal. Day 4, he's back in pads out on the field.
Okay. Arif.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's not much add to what Luke said. I think that ultimately the Vikings are bereft of talent, especially along the defense. They want to turn that defense around. That's why they fired the defensive coordinator. That's why they brought in so many defensive free agents. Danielle Hunter's just too good, right? And I think it would be pretty difficult to get any good value out of trading him. I think that if they were going to trade him, they already would have. I think that ultimately they'll find a way to work out a deal with Hunter. I don't know if day 3, day 4, I don't know if I'm going to be as specific as that, but I do think kind of early on in the process, they'll figure out a way to make sure that Hunter comes in, especially, if he misses 1 or 2 days, that's very clearly showing how much he's willing to do. That's a $50,000 fine that he's not going to get back, right? So that's a very committed way of demonstrating how serious you are. And I think that the Vikings know that they just don't have options. I think that if they wanted to really put the screws to him from a leverage perspective, they would have signed, a Jadeveon Clowney or a Melvin Ingram or something like that. I think they want specifically to work this one out, and I think that's why it gets done.
But what day specifically is he coming back, Arif?
6.
All right, you heard it here first.
Got it.
Day 6.
It like the leverage on both sides is very strongly pointing to it's best for both sides to get a deal done here. Because I think if Danielle Hunter and his agent have to go start negotiating trade deals and stuff, knowing how much the Vikings are going to demand for Danielle Hunter, that's just such a hard environment to operate in. And then on the Vikings side, for reasons that Luke and Arif both said, you can't expect to be taken seriously if you enter a season with Marcus Davenport as your best edge rusher by a lot. That just can't be an option. But I think for Danielle Hunter, because those fines are so substantial, I wonder if a hold in is the move, where you show up, you collect you skip your fines, but you don't participate, you don't practice, you still get to be with your teammates, you still get to be part of the team and, absorbing walkthrough information and stuff like that, but you're not actually participating until you get that new deal. And I wonder if part of the holdup here is Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. There's kind of this glut of extensions. And I think once one goes, then we'll know that they've figured out the puzzle of how to get everything they want. So then I think all the dominoes will fall very quickly. The hope is that happens in the first week or 2 of camp. Obviously, there's a lot of things that need to get done that might have nothing to do with Danielle Hunter. Might be Justin Jefferson trying to squeeze an extra bit of value out of this or whatever. That could be a holdup here. But I think we see a hold in until then. So if that means Danielle Hunter reports the first day of camp, then that I guess is my guess.
Yeah, we're going to find out.
Fakes a neck injury just to make everyone freak out.
Yeah, he'll go up and be like, "Sorry, I got a tweak."
God, that would.
They're going to be like, "Well, that really makes me want to give you $25 million guaranteed." Okay.
I feel like Danielle Hunter is underrated funny, right? That's something that players have said.
I've never seen it.
I don't know about that.
I've never seen that.
I've heard people say that about him, but we've never seen it because he won't be.
Well, that is kind of. If that's what you're hearing, maybe there's something to it, because that is what I heard about Eric Kendricks, is that he's very sociable, very kind of charismatic.
Said it.
And Eric Kendricks just did not talk to anybody or make any public appearances for the first 4 years of his career. We're why does everyone talk about how gregarious Eric Kendricks is? I don't get it. And then like in his final years with the Vikings, he opened up a lot. It was all there, everything that people were saying. So maybe I don't see that
quiet guy funny. Where you don't say anything for the whole conversation, but the one thing you did say was the funniest thing anyone said. Yeah.
I've just never seen, whether it's VEN footage, NFL Films footage, some kind of talking head. I've never seen a candid Danielle Hunter. I haven't. I can't. I don't know if there's evidence of it. So, and I don't see it
never with a camera
in the locker room.
It's got to be a testimonial from a player that it can get him in that environment.
You realize how difficult that is, right? Because you people forget that they're mic'd up in NFL games all the time.
Oh, for sure.
That's just a thing because why would you remember that? It's the least important detail you could bring with you into a game.
Mm-hmm. Everybody avoids them too. They're it's a Fed.
I think a hold-in is likely. I also hesitate, or I fail to see a world where Danielle gets exactly what he wants. There's going to have to be some serious compromise, and I think the Vikings probably win more than Daniil's camp wins. And if he had requested a trade, I think we would know about it. I think that gets in the news media. So obviously that's not on the table yet. When it might actually be in his best interest financially to have requested that, because then another team might give him the extension that the Vikings won't. Seems like they are both trying to work things out. I still think it's going to be a big 1-year deal where he gets taken care of this year, hits free agency, and that's very much on Kwesi's timeline of just opening up all his options for next offseason. I still predict a 1-year deal, but I would love to see 2. If it was a 2-year deal, I think that would be even a little better. That's still short term, keeps him around next year, gives you another crack at an extension in the offseason. That would be my hope, and I think something does get done. We'll find out. Probably tomorrow, Veteran Report Day. We're going to find out about probably some injuries, probably some other absences, contract stuff. Tomorrow's a big day. Kwesi talks, KOC talks, and we'll break it all down on the Minnesota Football Party, which is Tuesday with Spinman, Wednesday with Reggie Wilson, and then Thursday, the 4 of us back together once again. Thanks so much for watching today. Luke, Arif, great job. I'm Sam Ekstrom. Find us all on Twitter and find the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for watching. Training camp is here.